Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and over our time with the patch 11.1, I spent a ton of hours just playing as many different classes and specs to test out a variety of different new class changes and brand new tier sets coming out for Season 2. While the class tuning is by no means final, I did want to put together a highlight of the classes and specs specifically that I enjoyed the most in my time on the PTR. This doesn't mean that this is a list of classes that's going to be meta or what I think is going to be S tier options to main for the next season. Just the playstyles that I found to be fresher, revamped, and enjoyable, and these are the playstyles that held my attention and made me want to hop back on PTR to play them over and over and over again, either because they got an engaging new tier set or enough good class changes, or they're just looking better, stronger, or refreshed in one way or another, whether through a talent revamp or new hero specs or any of those features. And these are the classes that ended up captivating me the most over my time on the PTR. Tuning is by no means final, and they're still trying to figure out the class changes and in terms of how hard everything should hit for the season 2, and that's going to be an ongoing process, so definitely don't use this to figure out which class you're looking to main. But if you wanted to find out what I thought was the most fun class in 11.1, this is the whole list of specs with every single class here included, and I'll have chapter marks down below if you just want to skip around to the most relevant classes you're the most interested in. As always, if you want to see more 11.1 update videos, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. Otherwise, let's dive right in. Doing this in the alphabetical order, we're going to start off with the class of Death Knight, and I gotta say, I ended up liking the Frost Death Knight quite a bit. Their tier set really focuses on using Obliteration, but also using abilities like Frost Strike and Glacial Advance, which initially I thought that we are going to see less Breath of Sadragosa based gameplay, but that is not really true. While they do have playstyles that play around the Rider of the Apocalypse, as well as the Frost Strike Shattering playstyle with the Shattering Blade, which can be really fun when it comes to cleave situations with Shattering Frost, there is opportunity for Breath to also exist at the same time, because Obliterations proc free Glacial Advances, which can be used while you're spamming Breath of Sadragosa. So both Deathbringer as well as Rider of the Apocalypse are also fairly viable, so it really comes down to the tuning as to which one of us is going to be really good. But either way, it does open up at least options and choices for the Rider of the Apocalypse to be playable as a Frost Death Knight. Plus, I'm a huge fan of the Obliteration-based gameplay, not as much of Breath of Sadragosa, even though it can be very strong at times. So at the very least, it looks like Frost Death Knight is walking in with choices, and my current favorite playstyle, at least so far early in the PTR, does seem like a decent and a viable alternative. Next on the list is Demon Hunter, and I find myself having a lot of fun with Havoc, but also a little bit with Vengeance, with the entire class actually feeling kind of fun in 11.1. Granted, mostly because of the Eldraki-based playstyle, which for a good portion on the PTR was ahead. Recently, some tuning came in to try to adjust Eldraki against Felskard, but with any means necessary being gone for Havoc Demon Hunter, Felskard really fell off to the side, with Eldraki becoming more prominent. There was also a couple other changes with Havoc where you don't really use movement-based talents, so that really gave you a different bit of gameplay where you're mostly focused on shorter cooldown of I-Beam and using abilities aggressively while having full access to your mobility tools when you want it. Switching out the playstyle for the Eldraki Reaver's Glaive, but also have quite a bit of Khalid with Wounded Quarry, which did get a bit of a nerf, but the playstyle overall was a lot of fun. It just gave you like a very solid build of pure AoE damage with large focus on focus damage. Like your priority target can just take all this cleave damage you're doing to everything around you and just funnel it back to that target, which has been really fun, though it's not going to be build that everybody is going to enjoy, as it is still controversial, both with Eldraki not being a fan favorite, but also No Mover being a playstyle that not every player enjoys at the same time. Vengeance on its own ended up being just a very strong and sturdy tanking spec that's pretty fun and pretty easy to play, and I've always enjoyed it because it doesn't have too many cooldowns to manage, unlike Warriors and Paladins, which sometimes, as someone who doesn't play a lot of tanks so often, having a more in-the-moment, low amount of buttons and cooldowns to manage kind of a class, with Vengeance feeling a lot more active and a lot more in the moment, I actually ended up enjoying it quite a bit. It just ended up suiting my gameplay and my preferences a little bit more, and I found it fairly easy to get into, which gave it a pretty big bonus. Moving on to the class of Druid, I found Boomkin actually pretty enjoyable, primarily because it's a caster, and casters play around with a jackpot style tier set, which reads any one of your abilities has a chance to proc a jackpot, which is a very unique class-specific or spec-specific mechanic, usually using one of your talented abilities. Using major or combat abilities does guarantee a jackpot every single time, and for Boomkins it ended up being just you growing more mushrooms all over the place. This combined together with Sunseeker Mushroom makes Waning Twilight super easy to maintain, as it just gives you an extra guaranteed or almost nearly guaranteed dot that also deals a ton of damage. And playing around with 3 mushrooms I actually kind of enjoyed, especially with the resources and the output that it provides. As for Boomkin though, I found them to be pretty easy to get into. They have strong damage, at least on the PTR, and they're not the hardest class to start playing and performing, at least when it comes to dungeons, which is what I primarily focused on the PTR. Between the Feral, Guardian, Resto, I found myself drawn to balance just a little bit more. It could be because I only recently started picking up Druid yet again over on the Live Realms, and I kind of just like how it doesn't change too heavily over on the PTR realms, maintaining for the most part a very similar structure that keeps that familiarity that allows you to really pop off with the damage with the loons chosen. But as far as damage is concerned, that is all accounted for continued tuning. Then we'll move on to Evokers, and for the most part, even though we are seeing some actual nerfs towards augmentation, it will likely continue being a very popular spec. I'd be very surprised to see that thing getting knocked off the top. It's been a very popular choice, and recently they took some heavy nerf bat to the thing. Hopefully it'll end up kneecapping them a little bit in order to give other specs some playability. But when it comes to dragons, outside of what I think augmentation, which even after the nerfs will probably still be very strong, I really enjoyed preservation. Mostly because of their tier set that allows them to shorten the cooldown of their Verdant Embrace and add this heal called Insurance with that Verdant Embrace, which synergizes super well with the rest of their kit, specifically when it comes to playing around the passive of the Life Bind, where you're able to bind yourself to your allies and then start healing yourself, which will also duplicate to all of your allies for a portion of the healing. Plus also with the Echo heal mechanic that Preservation plays around with, there's a lot of cool combos that you can play around with it, and I've been a huge fan of how Preservation plays so far. I did give a try for Devastation, and they have gotten improved with a bunch of new talents, but honestly, I'm just a sucker for the combo-based gameplay that you can achieve with Preservation. It's just incredibly fun for me specifically, so I will most likely end up enjoying that heading into 11.1. For the class of Hunter, I found myself surprisingly drawn to Beast Mastery. Normally it is a spec that I don't really get into. Usually it's either marksmanship or in most cases survival, and as much as I love the changes to survival and marksmanship, and I'll definitely give them a go, I found myself having a ton of fun with Beast Mastery. Could be because of the early damage numbers, which are getting tuned and I get a nerf, or it could be just the ease of play, or it could be some of the talent synergies that it has gotten, but I really think it comes down to the hero talents, which all add a little bit extra towards the simplicity that is Beast Mastery, which isn't a bad thing. I do just like having a nice little hook towards a bit of gameplay, and I think both of these add a bit of that hook. Pack Leader, you're able to summon Wyvern, Boar, and Bear, which slightly affect the way that you play your playstyle, but also these pets interact with your BS Hunter kit a little bit differently, with a Bear really working kind of like another beast that you get to summon, while Boar gives you cleave on your Cobra shots, Wyvern amps up all of your damage, which could also be really fun, and it just gives you a very different setup with lead from the front, which allows you Bestial Wrath to further empower your big beast dynamic combos, and it's been really bursty on a shorter cooldown. But I also found myself enjoying Dark Ranger, especially when they changed up their tier or capstone. I was almost going to say tier set, which has also been pretty strong, by the way, and also got nerfed. But the Withering Fire now procs off of Call of the Wild, which gives you a guaranteed window instead of having to wait for 3 Bestial Wraths, which is much better. And there's enough talents in there that allow Killshot to still be a relevant button that gives you more of this active-based gameplay that I really do like for Beast Mastery. And I think both of these hero specs really do add towards my enjoyment of Beast Mastery so far from the PTR testing. When it comes to mages, I've really been loving over the last few weeks on Live Realms Frostfire. It has become my all-time favorite range spec in general, and I think it really does help enhance fire and frost in their own unique ways. But with them nerfing Frostfire for fire, I thought my favorite combination kind of broke apart, and I don't know, I thought maybe I would just abandon Fire Mage heading into this update, but then it gave some of the new talents and Sun Fury a go. Playing around a shorter cooldown of your combustion combined with your tier set actually ends up being kind of enjoyable, especially when you're a big fan of just spreading this ignite all over targets, and right now mages can do that pretty easily with regular summons of your Phoenix to add additional supplemental damage. It's surprisingly incredibly easy to get into, though it's probably going to be a playstyle that's going to be very locked behind having really good gear to pull off, which is pretty easy to do on a PTR. But the output itself that it does is kind of fun and also, like I said, really easy to get into. With the Mage spec, Fire specifically, I found it in previous expansions to be a little bit more demanding compared to Frost and even Arcane at times to get into. But this version of Fire seems like it's really straightforward. Faster cooldown reduction to combust means you have a lot more instant cast goes, a lot more firepower, and much faster cooldown reduction on the combustion to be able to get that major ability back up and online. Allows fire mages to feel impactful a lot more regularly than they do. When it comes to monks, however, you would think I would enjoy Windwalker because they got a bunch of new fun talents and a bunch of new updates and improvements, and they do look really good. But if I had to pick between Windwalker, Brewmaster, and Mistweaver, I have to go with Mistweaver. As somebody who plays DPS classes for the most part, I don't really get to heal all that often, or at least I don't get myself drawn to things like Holy Priest, for instance, all that much. So when it comes to Mistweaver and being able to fist weave, dealing damage to heal my allies, it was excellent, an absolutely fun playstyle, and with some of the further improvements they've done for Mistweaver to give them better damage to healing conversion, even more powerful versions of their Celestial, some opportunity to play 1 minute Celestial or 2 minute, but a more impactful Celestial, and given the big taser buff from Jade Empowerment, it's become an incredibly fun playstyle to go with Master of Harmony, which now greatly benefits with Endless Drought. Super fun if you're looking to play a healer, but you come from a DPS background, especially if you played melee in the past, because this thing feels like a Windwalker, but you do a little bit of damage, a little bit of healing, most of it is instacast, and all of it feels highly impactful. And it's been really fun playing Mistweaver since it looks like a fairly competitive option so far on the PTR, and I've been enjoying it greatly, but specifically from the angle of fist weaving, which you continue to find fun in even to this day. When it comes to Paladins, I have to go with Retribution. It's probably one of the easiest melee to get into overall. It's a very fun spec that's gotten a handful of updates for 11.1, but if anything, I actually kind of like their tier set. Maybe it's just the outlaw gambler in me. But with a 4 set, there's a chance whenever you lose your winning streak, which is like a melee unique mechanic, every time you lose it, your last holy power is getting refunded to you, and your next few holy power spenders cost no holy power, and you could just spam them back to back to back. And it's actually kind of incredible just how many abilities you could use back to back, and there's like an audio element to it, like you can hear a click, that's how you know your tier set has just procced, and you can just slam Templars or Divine Storms back to back on your target. Plus, when you pair Paladin together, you can either go just melting faces everywhere with Herald of the Sun, huge damage over time based gameplay with a bit more of a passive playstyle, or Tempo for the massive impactful hammer, which is always satisfying to look at. Retribution Paladin just ends up being a very fun one that's easy spec to jump into any dungeon and get into. I'm not really sure how their damage is going to be because tuning is really going to determine how good the spec is going to be in the overall meta for Season 2, but in terms of just enjoyment and ease of access, Retribution definitely hits the mark quite easily. When it comes to the class of Priest, I have to go with Disc. Disc has been incredibly strong and competitive over on the PTR. They did, however, receive a bunch of nerfs towards their Void Weaver playstyle, specifically when it comes to the use of Void Wrath, making them a little bit less effective. So it's probably going to impact how Disc is going to perform, but outside of just performance numbers, Disc has actually been really fun to get into. Still a little bit sore that they swapped out by Rapture for Evangelism, but the rest of the kit feels amazing. The cooldown reduction they added for Penance and gave it a little more of a kick to it feels really good to press, even if I don't have like the biggest Penance lineup. Even some of the Shadowward Pain changes they did with them swapping out Talent for Encroaching Shadows and things like Revel in Darkness, it actually feels like maintaining Shadowward Pain has gotten a lot less painful, pardon the pun. But the Discipline Priest playstyle still has this core identity of just being able to deal damage to heal all of your allies, and I love that setup. It's just super enjoyable. It's kind of like a Mistweaver, which is like a melee DPS but becomes a healer. Disc is kind of like a ranged DPS playstyle, but from like a DPS looking to start healing allies, and it just has a nice swap ability to it. Big fan of it. I feel like it's a very strong playstyle, and it still has a very fun gameplay loop, especially with some of the different cooldown reduction things they did for Void Summoner. Allows your Mindbender and Shadow Fiend or Void Rat to come out exactly when you need it, and it just in a situation where I feel like I have a cooldown available for just about every single situation and encounter. Now, when it comes to rogues, I won't blame you for saying that I'm biased, but I mean, when you put it in perspective, Outlaw is objectively more fun than all the other rogue specs, and I'm gonna stand by it, because Assassination did not really get anything new in patch 11.1. I mean, literally nothing but a tier set that has a little bit of RNG, but the spec hasn't improved, it hasn't grown. It is still fun, but it just hasn't got better. Subtlety also didn't really change too much. It had a really strong tier set, but that got gutted recently. So you can't even enjoy the big damage numbers, or at least the numbers people were theorizing on paper as to what Subtlety could achieve. And the only spec that's actually gotten better is Outlaw, primarily in its RNG-based gameplay. I mean, they took a talent like Sleight of Hand, allowed you to get more chances for 2 buff and a 4 set, or a 5 buff. Then they took your tier set and gave you even more RNG protection with your 4 set, giving you even more chances to roll the bones. So now you're just swimming in buffs. The spec feels faster, you generate more resources, cooldown reduction is a lot better, and no matter what kind of build you run, whether you play the ambush build or whether you play the original keep it rolling build, both of them feel really good. It feels like you're just getting a lot of those cooldowns back super quickly, which allows you to grapple around more, pop defensives a lot more, use utility abilities a lot more, and that's like the only spec that's really gotten improved in 11.1, which I actually found really fun for myself. And I'm someone who spent majority of 11.1 playing everything that isn't a rogue, because this class barely got any new things in general. Even our tier sets are not super impactful. But Outlaw would say and argue is the spec that got the most amount of improvements in 11.1, which isn't too many improvements, but it actually does feel better in day-to-day gameplay when it comes to playing the spec in this brand new update. When it comes to the class of Shaman, I have to go with Enhancement, and in fact, I feel like the War Within expansion should be renamed to the Shaman Within, because it feels like Shamans are in a really good spot, even as we're looking to head into Season 2. Granted, they are doing some tuning, and it looks like they're trying to pull back on Enhancement a little bit, but this spec right now is walking in with probably one of the best changes so far for Season 2 when it comes to Shaman specifically. Both of your hero specs, Stormbringer and Totemic, are really close in damage, offering slightly different damage profile, but the performance is so neck to neck, it almost feels like there's a bit of a choice and some flexibility whether you play one or the other, which is what we ideally would like to see out of most hero specs, not just one being the best and the other maybe not being as good, except in handful of content. Enhancement also got beefed up when it comes to your Maelstrom generators, like your Lava Lash, Storm Strike, Ice Strike, even though that doesn't get a lot of value, but even Crash Lightning, all these abilities that deal Storm Strike, Ice Strike, Flame Strike, damage, all of those hit much harder than before. They ended up pulling back on the elemental moves a little, so your Maelstrom and magic-based damage is going to be a little bit less, as they're allowing that physical damage to continue to stay in relevancy, but it opens up some opportunities for Totemic and their Lava Lash-based gameplay with Hot Hand and Reactivity to get some really great output damage, and really I think allows you to utilize more of your talent tree in general to have a bit more of this cleave capability. Plus, Enhancement also was walking in as a Shaman. You're still a Swiss Army knife of a spec. You have a lot of unique totems, from stun totems to movement totems with some movement breaks. You have yourself Poison Cleansing totem, which is still really viable. You have yourself no longer AG, but some off healings as they try to buff it up a little bit. Even though that utility doesn't seem like it's going to be necessary and outright game breaking as it was in Season 1, heading into Season 2, it still is there and does allow you to specialize and customize your talent tree to fit a variety of different situations, which is going to be helpful at the end of the day. And to me, I thought to myself, like, even if they nerfed the spec all the way to Smithereens, I think I would still have fun with Enhancement, just because its everyday day-to-day combat gameplay loop is incredibly fun for me. And I tried Totemic, I tried Tempest or Stormbringer playstyle, and I find all type of builds for Enhancement actually pretty fun to play into, and hopefully the tuning does treat them nicely, and we'll potentially see a little bit more Enhancement Shaman heading into Season 2. Now, when it comes to Warlocks, I actually have 2 specs that I ended up enjoying a bunch over on the PTR, and I think it comes down to between Destro and Demo for their own reasons. The Destro Mastery in particular was really good, especially like the tier set bonus that allows you to play around with the Mastery a little bit more aggressively. Summon Up an Infernal allows you to get full maximum benefits out of your mastery, and it's a weird mastery, it's a little hard to explain, but it basically gives you a range of how much damage you can do, either between 31% damage increase floor or up to 31 additional percentage, and that shifts every single time you cast a spell. So the tier set allows you to get full value out of your mastery, which allows you to use that stat in a very unique way. And you can utilize that mastery whether you hit a jackpot from a random proc or every time you drop down a infernal, which is really fun. They also got a couple of new talents, like being able to get passive demon fires. I'm not a big fan of channel demon fires on ability. I think Destra already does way too much standing still, not enough movement. So I really do enjoy having a passive version that can at least proc for my withers or my dots or for my hardcast incinerates. And I think just adding the damage is just kind of enjoyable. They also did add a new version of portals where you can get a more passive portal from your immolations or withers. I tried it, doesn't seem as effective, but maybe it'll be really good in content like PvP specifically. And at least I like that they're trying to find ways for you to at least be able to incorporate some of these talents you normally wouldn't spec into or even press a global for in a more passive manner. And hopefully, if it's done correctly, maybe there'll be some build variety for destruction going forward. Though the other spec I found really fun was Demonology, and that's also primarily from their tier set, very similar to Destra, as you get to summon a brand new demon, a Greater Dreadstalker. So it's not completely brand new, it is still Dreadstalker like the ones you summoned, but just like a bigger version that is a lot more effective than a normal one. Casting a Tyrant always summons a Dreadstalker, this bonus one. Casting Hellnigel Dawn, which I think is the fun part, causes the Dreadstalker to cast a Dreadbite at 50% effectiveness, actually all active Dreadstalkers plus the bonus one. So the more Hellnigel Dawns you do, the more, I guess, in a way, kill commands you get to do as the Demonology. And being able to add another demon and incorporate demons' abilities with your abilities, I think is really fun. It also allows you to kind of adjust your playstyle a little bit. Every talent that buffs your Dreadstalker buffs the big one, and it also allows you to kind of set up your Hellnigel Dawns in a way where you can get all these big Dreadstalkers and then go back-to-back bites with Hellnigel Dawns, and I think it's really fun. I really want to see more demons out of Demonology in the future, unique demons that interact with the rest of your kit. I think that'll be really fun tier sets to experiment with, and maybe we'll see this Greater Dreadhound becoming one of the talents that you'll be able to spec into in the future update. Finally, when it comes to warriors, I have to go with both of the DPS specs. I was trying to figure out if I like Fury or Arms better, and I find that I just like both of them a lot. I really wish warriors had a bit more utility, which is the only thing I really wish the class had, but when it comes to damage, it looks like they have it in spades this time around. Both Fury and Arms have been getting juiced week after week after week after week on the PTR, and their damage numbers are just absolutely diabolical. Like, whoever is buffing Fury Warriors and Arms Warriors, I think they're looking to main Fury Warrior or Arms Warriors, and it feels like they're just insanely effective. I wish they had a utility, so I feel like they brought more than just raw damage to dungeons, but the damage they bring right now is pretty fun. That's my only gripe about it. But both of them hit very hard. Fury Warrior has fast-paced gameplay. I love Mountain Thane. I love the playstyle Slayer and how it changes between one and the other, and they buffed up all aspects of their cleave. They did end up going into some of the talents to give Fury a burst window with Reckless Abandon. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I think there's some potential to have really huge, massive burst damage to combine with the rest of your cooldowns. That could be a lot of fun, since a lot of your cooldowns do line up around the 1.5 minute mark, so you can give it some insanely good burst. But also you could play the sustained build, and I feel like it's good that at least there's an option to play a more sustained based build, which I preferred in dungeons. As for Arms, I feel like they're going in the damage profile of Colossus. Maybe there's some opportunity for Slayer, but Colossus feels really good. Massive mortal strikes, huge cleaves. It's just very fun to play into. And they've adjusted their build to make sure you never hold back a mortal strike. You don't need to ramp it up with big damage, so that feels a little bit better to just spam whenever you have it available. I feel like it grants them a little bit of burst, but also quite a bit of sustained damage. But also when you do get to set up a massive mortal strike, it just feels like there's a much bigger to pay off. Plus, who doesn't love watching some of the biggest crits from you demolish? I'm a big fan and a big sucker for massive big numbers, and Arms right now just hits it for me exactly how I like it. As always though, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. I would very much appreciate it. Good luck to everybody trying to pick their next main for the next update. Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.